Good riddance. Well, I've got the axle pulled out of this. I think it's definitely time for me to remove these factory Dodge coil mounts that I welded onto my frame and install some adjustable Tahoverlanding coil mounts. These are much better. These Dodge mounts are the worst. They're so hard to pull from a Dodge factory frame because you've got to cut all the welds and do it without destroying them. You have no adjustability. As you can see, the way this thing is built, look up here, there's no metal in here, so I couldn't have really lowered it much to attach it to the frame. If I had lowered this down to attach to the frame, I'd lost all of the mounting to the way the frame works. So there really wasn't any adjustability, so I had to use 1.5-inch thick coil spacers that cost $120 to even make the only real height I could work with here and the spring end up where it needs to be. These Dodge mounts, while being worse and very difficult to remove, you can't see it real well, but right here is about the only real contact that this part of the coil mount has on the frame. Above this, it starts tilting in, so I had to leave all this on so I had somewhere to really attach it, because one stamped unit. It didn't give me a lot of options when it comes to adjusting the height, so I was able to get it pretty close with that 1.5-inch coil spring spacer I showed you, and then I had a little bit of wiggle as far as height goes to fine tune that. But the Tahoverlanding coil mounts are so much better. So first, you can see they're slant cut across the bottom of the frame. So they will maximize the amount of weld on there. And see, this window here gives you even more to weld to. Plus I've got center line marks to help get this centered. That was another difficult part when I was installing these, is just finding center and getting it centered. And since these are shaped like this, they actually tilt and shape out away from the frame. I actually had to kind of jig it up to get it even parallel, the two spring mounts parallel to one another. It was a lot of work to even use these. So I'm glad that I'm glad that I've come up with a much better solution, and I want to run these instead of those. Plus, they're much thicker material than this is. So as you can see, look, see how it tips away from the frame, and the only real contact is right here. So there's weld behind here and there, but even then that weld had to be stacked, because you can see it already slopes away from the frame starting way down here. So if anyone was wondering why I didn't just lower these down another 1.5 inches on the frame, is there would have been no real strength to this. I would have dropped this way down, I would have had to cut off all this, and there wouldn't have been any real strength to those. So it seemed like a better route to weld them on in their strongest form and then use coil spring spacer. But you don't have to do that with the Tahoverlanding coil mounts. So this nightmare, not your problem. So with cutting off this coil mount, the best way I'm going to do it is I'm probably not going to try to cut the weld itself. So what I'll probably do is take a cutoff wheel and follow next to the weld through the metal right about here. And then that'll leave the weld still on the frame, but then I can take a grinding wheel and a flap wheel and grind that down. Now back in here you can see that I put as much weld in here as I could, and obviously as much as I could up in here. So we're just gonna have to cut and just make it go away. Now I'm a fan of Milwaukee grinders, and I'll use my M18 cordless grinder most of the time. But when we're really trying to cut and cut, something with a cord usually just packs more speed and power and will get it done a little bit better than the cordless will. Good riddance. Time to change to a grinding wheel, and then maybe to a flat wheel after that. There's big tall stuff, big thick stuff. Let's get the grinding wheel going. See, now that's as close as I can get it with a hard wheel, or a grinding wheel, you might call it. And so now I'm going to step to a flap wheel to do the cleanup work. Something like that. Now, I intentionally didn't put a lot of effort forth in when I cut this off, because I wanted to do this and show you. You see these gouges from the cutoff wheel? You're going to do that same thing when you cut off your brackets. So I figured I would do it, and because it's actually unavoidable in a lot of cases anyway. And so I figured I would do it and then show you how to fix that as part of, you know, when you do your swap, when you cut off your own brackets of, you know, anytime you're cutting brackets and mounts off of your frame. Okay, so in my next video, I'm going to show you how to measure for and install your Tahoverlanding coil mounts on your frame. Something right about there. And for those who are curious, 8 cutoff wheels is what it took to cut that thing off.